I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, even as I drove through the quiet streets of a town I didn't recognize. Sarah had been gone for days, no texts, no calls. The last thing she'd said to me was that she was using the Randonautica app for some harmless fun, hoping for an adventure. That's when I got the text. "It's the house. You need to see it." Then, nothing. I found myself parked at the edge of a forgotten road, the air heavy with a sense of dread. The house Sarah had described stood there, looming in the distance, abandoned and suffocated by vines, as if nature itself wanted it hidden. The windows were boarded up, but that didn't stop the feeling of being watched from those dark, hollow frames. I approached cautiously, every step echoing with a creak of the overgrown grass beneath my boots. The swing set in the yard was a stark contrast to the silence around me. It swayed gently in the wind, a reminder of a life that had once filled this place, before whatever darkness had settled here. My heart hammered in my chest as I reached the front door. The doorknob felt cold and wrong, like touching something that didn't want to be disturbed. I pushed it open, and a groan echoed through the house like a warning. The interior was exactly as Sarah had described. Dust-coated surfaces, a half-eaten meal left on the table, a child's shoe lying just beyond the entrance. Everything felt frozen in time, like the world had stopped suddenly, leaving behind only silence and dread. I stepped inside, the creaking of the floorboards the only sound in the stifling air. As I moved further into the house, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to tighten around me. Every inch of this place screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. Not without finding out what had happened to Sarah. I called her name once, but the sound of my voice felt wrong, swallowed up by the darkness that seemed to pulse from the walls. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, like someone was speaking just beneath the surface of the air. I froze, straining to listen. It was coming from deeper in the house, from somewhere near the stairs that led to the second floor. I should have turned around. I should have run just like Sarah must have. But something about that whisper, about the unnatural silence, drew me in, like the house itself wanted me to know its secret. My feet moved before my mind could catch up, pulling me toward the source of the sound. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step a battle against the growing sense of unease. I reached the top, the air thicker, more suffocating, as if the house was trying to keep me there, trap me within its decaying walls. That's when I saw it. The door at the end of the hall was slightly ajar, a faint light spilling out from the cracks. I walked toward it, my pulse roaring in my ears, and pushed it open. Inside was a child's bedroom, untouched by time. Toys scattered on the floor, a bed with a neatly tucked blanket, and a small desk with the drawings spread across it. But it was the closet that caught my attention. The door was slightly open, and from within came the unmistakable sound of breathing. My hands trembled as I reached for the closet door, my mind screaming at me to leave, but my body disobeying. I yanked the door open, and what I saw froze the blood in my veins. Sarah stood there, eyes wide, staring at me. But it wasn't Sarah. Her skin was pale, her face contorted into an expression of fear and pain, and her eyes were blank, empty voids of nothingness. She opened her mouth, but instead of words, a blood-curdling scream tore from her throat, a sound so unnatural it sent waves of terror crashing through me. I stumbled back, my heart racing, unable to tear my eyes away from her as she stepped forward, her movements jerky, like a puppet pulled by unseen strings. The scream grew louder, filling the room, echoing off the walls, bouncing back at me from every corner of the house. I turned and ran, my body moving on instinct, every muscle screaming to escape. The house seemed to warp around me, the walls narrowing, the floor shifting beneath my feet as I bolted for the stairs. Behind me, the sound of Sarah's scream followed, relentless, growing louder with every step I took. I burst through the front door, gasping for breath, and stumbled out into the night. The swing set creaked eerily in the breeze, the house standing silent and foreboding in the distance. But even out in the open, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me, that the house had let me go but had taken something from me in return. I've never been the same since that night. The scream haunts my dreams, and I still hear whispers when I'm alone, as if the house is calling me back, waiting for me to make the same mistake Sarah did. I know one thing for certain. Whatever darkness lurks in that house, it doesn't let go. And one day, I fear, it will come for me too. It started out like any other adventure we'd taken. Me, Ben, and Ashley, off to push the boundaries of boredom. We were restless that weekend, so naturally someone suggested the Randonautica app. You know, that app that's supposed to lead you to places based on your intent. It sounded fun, maybe a bit creepy, but that's what we were after. We set our intention for something mysterious and hit the button. The app's compass spun, pointing us deeper into the forest that bordered the town, and just like that, we were off. At first, everything seemed normal, the trail well worn by hikers and the afternoon sun filtering through the trees in golden beams. But the deeper we went, the more the forest felt different. The path began to fade, the ground turning soft and damp underfoot. The air changed, too. It grew thick, heavy, almost suffocating, and with every step, the trees seemed to close in, their shadows growing longer. I should have listened to the pit in my stomach when the birds stopped singing. That silence, it was like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting. We should head back, Ashley suggested, her voice wavering, but Ben brushed it off. It's just a bit further, he said, his eyes locked on the phone as it led us to a clearing. When we got there, I felt my blood run cold. The sun was setting fast, painting the sky in deep purples and reds, and in the center of the clearing was this ancient oak tree. Its twisted branches stretched out like something alive, clawing at the last bit of daylight. But it wasn't the tree that made my skin crawl. No, it was the figure standing beneath it. It stood with its back to us, completely still. My first thought was that it was a person, some hiker maybe, but the longer I looked, the less human it seemed. There was something wrong about it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Its silhouette was all wrong, too tall, too thin, like its limbs didn't bend the way they should. And then it moved. It didn't turn to face us, not at first. Instead, its head twisted at this impossible angle, like it wasn't bound by bones or joints. Two glowing eyes blinked open from the darkness where its face should have been, staring straight at us. "Run!" Ben shouted, and in that instant, we were sprinting back on through the forest, our feet pounding the earth. I could hear the thing behind us moving fast, crashing through the undergrowth. My lungs burned, and every muscle in my body screamed. But I couldn't stop. None of us could. Branches whipped at my face, and the forest around me became a blur of shadows and terror. It was getting closer. I could feel it, hear the low, guttural growl that made my blood freeze. I dared a glance behind me, just once, and wished I hadn't. The thing was no longer walking. It was running, its limbs twisting and bending in ways no living thing should be able to. It was gaining on us. Ashley stumbled, her scream piercing the night as she hit the ground. I stopped, grabbing her arm, yanking her to her feet, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound of heavy footsteps closed in behind us. I thought we were done for, but somehow we kept going. By some miracle, we broke through the tree line and into the open. The forest spat us out like it was done playing with us, and we collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. My chest felt like it was about to explode, but I couldn't stop glancing back, half expecting that thing to come charging after us. But it didn't. The forest stood silent and still, like nothing had happened, like it had swallowed whatever nightmare had been chasing us whole. Ben was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. What the hell was that?" I couldn't answer. I didn't want to, because whatever that thing was, it wasn't something I wanted to think about. It wasn't something I wanted to remember. We never talked about that night after that. We didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. But every now and then when I find myself too close to those woods, I swear I can still hear it. The sound of footsteps in the dark, getting closer, waiting. I never went back to that forest, and I never will. I remember that night like it was yesterday. The night when curiosity led me down a path I should have never taken. The city, usually a vibrant place of wonder, had grown too predictable for me. So I turned to Randonautica, hoping for an adventure. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe something strange, something mysterious. What I got was so much worse. The app took me further than I'd ever expected, weaving me through narrow streets and crowded intersections until I found myself in a part of the city I didn't recognize. It was odd. One minute I was surrounded by the noise of traffic and people, and the next, I stood in silence, staring at an alleyway so dark it looked like it swallowed the light. Something pulled me toward it. I don't know why, but I stepped inside, the smell hitting me first, the sour stench of garbage mixed with something sweet. Sickly sweet. My heart pounded as I made my way deeper into the alley, the noise of the city fading behind me. And then I saw it. At first I thought it was trash, just another piece of debris discarded on the ground. But when I got closer, I realized it was a doll. A porcelain doll. Its dress was filthy, torn and stained, but there was something about it, something unsettling. Its eyes, vacant, hollow, stared back at me as if they were waiting. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe it was the curiosity, maybe the unnerving silence that surrounded me. The doll was cold in my hands, colder than it should have been. As I wiped away some of the dirt, I noticed something on its back. A word, forever, written in what looked like dried blood. A chill ran through me. The moment I read that word, the air around me changed. It felt heavier, almost suffocating, like something was pressing down on my chest. I turned to leave, but that's when I felt it. A hand, cold and bony, gripping my wrist. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. But there was no one there. No one. The alley was completely empty. I yanked my arm, trying to free myself, but the grip only tightened, pinning me in place. I glanced down at the doll, and that's when I saw it. Its smile. It had changed. That painted-on smile, chipped and faded, now looked wider, almost predatory. And its eyes, those hollow eyes, were no longer empty. They were burning with a malevolent glee, watching me, mocking me. Panic surged through me. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen in place, my wrist still caught in that invisible grip. I felt like I was drowning in fear. I had to do something, anything to break free. In a desperate attempt, I hurled the doll to the ground. The porcelain shattered, the pieces scattering across the alley. The second the doll broke, the grip on my wrist vanished, and I stumbled back, gasping for air as if I had been holding my breath for hours. The silence around me lifted, replaced by the distant hum of the city. The alley was just an alley again, the oppressive presence gone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me, waiting for me to falter. I didn't look back as I ran from that place. I didn't care where I was going, as long as it was far away from that alley, far away from that cursed doll. Even now I can't escape the memory. Every time I walk through the city, I feel it, that creeping sensation that something is following me. I see the doll's eyes in my dreams, hear its smile in the whisper of the wind. It's always there, lurking in the shadows, reminding me that some things should never be found. I haven't touched Randonautica since, but the damage is already done. That night changed me. The city I once loved is no longer the same. Everywhere I go, I'm haunted by the thought that the doll wasn't destroyed, that it's still out there, waiting for someone else to pick it up, waiting to claim another soul. And maybe, just maybe, it's already chosen its next victim.